Hello, my name is Patrick Usher, and in this video I'm going to discuss the essential importance of the body-mind connection in the development of Potts syndrome. Now, the body-mind connection is something which is not often discussed. We're very familiar with the concept of the mind-body connection, and you may think, given that the program that I think is the best possible treatment for Potts syndrome, the dynamic neural retraining system, is clearly a kind of mind-body program. It's complicated calling it that, but in a sense it is. One would then suggest that Potts syndrome is a mind-body problem. Of course, it isn't. It's more a body-mind problem. There can, of course, be a mind-body element, but and there is, but it's primarily a body-mind problem. And what do I mean by that? Well, you see, things work both ways. Our limbic system is constantly perceiving events outside of us, in the external world, and it's constantly perceiving what's actually happening within our body. We're getting sensory information about what's happening in our body all the time. So these two things are going on. When we think about the information that we're getting from within our body, this is the body-mind connection. Okay, so what happens in the body matters to the mind. Now, in the point of view of, and I should say that actually the signals coming up from the body into the brain are much more pronounced and much more prominent than the signals from the brain going down into the body. It's very important. I think I read actually in a very, and I could be wrong, but in a very important and influential book called Descartes' Error by Damasio. Fantastic book, mainly written from the point of view, well, actually written, never mind, but a fantastic book. But I think that 90% of the signals in the sort of mind-body, body-mind connection are the body-mind aspect, and 10% are the mind-body. So it's very important what's happening in the body to the limbic system and to the brain. And from the point of view of traumatic events, this is essential, because we make the mistake, we make this cultural assumption that traumatic events are things that happen externally to us, and that that's all that they are. Now, of course, that's true that traumatic events happen externally to us and can have profoundly damaging effects, including in the development, and can contribute to the development of conditions like Potts syndrome, as was true for me. But the vast, but what we're not culturally aware of is the body-mind connection, and how traumatic events to the body can really flip the limbic system in particular into a hardwired state of crisis. And yet we should be, because scientifically speaking, we know that the body-mind connection is much more powerful than the mind-body one. The internal sensations that we receive and what's happening internally is of much greater interest, in some sense, to the limbic system than what's happening externally. And to a degree that makes sense, because we're always with our internal sensations. Whereas cars approaching us that shouldn't be, or tigers chasing us that shouldn't be, are hopefully more, the less frequent events. To use the example of a virus, which is a very important example to use in the case of Potts syndrome, because it is estimated in research that the triggering event for Potts syndrome in about 50% of cases is a viral illness. This is very instructive, because essentially a virus affects so many aspects of the body, and is registered by the brain and the limbic system as an assault on the organism. So when you have a virus, your nervous system, which is of course connected to your limbic system, is in a highly protective state and is trying to fight off the virus, and so on and so forth. But the thing is, if that virus is particularly severe, then what might happen is that the limbic system will essentially be so traumatized by that virus that it will remain stuck in a chronic state of flight or fight or chronic state of crisis, even after the virus may have left. Okay, and that is what causes. That's what is the triggering aspect of causing POTS syndrome, and a range of other things, including chronic fatigue syndrome, which is slightly different. I mean, similar actions, but probably something slightly different going on in the brain. So that's sort of why it's really important. And we, as I said, because culturally we are unaware that this is a possibility, which is one of the reasons that you find with sort of chronic fatigue syndrome is that people it just seems, generally speaking, that people haven't realized that chronic fatigue syndrome is caused by the brain, because they're afraid of that looking like it's psychosomatic, which it's for the birds. It's not psychosomatic. It might affect a part of the brain that has a lot of psychological components, but is by no means a part of the brain which is primarily psychological, anything but, in fact. So people often in chronic fatigue syndrome tend to want to sort of establish that there is a virus that's still in the body, even when this can't be found, because the virus is often left, but the brain remains stuck in a protective mode, which results in the immune system being suppressed, which is why you still feel like you have the flu, and still feel like you have a virus, with all these flight or fight protective messages going down through the nervous system, leading to low energy production and suppression of the immune system. So that's kind of what's happening. But culturally, we are unaware of this possibility, and yet it makes absolute sense, because, as I said earlier, the limbic system is hugely interested in what's happening in the body, much more interested than it is in what's happening outside of the body. So something traumatic or severe happens to the body, the limbic system wants to know, and if it's severe enough, the limbic system can register it as traumatic and enter a state of crisis. A state of crisis which is very distinctly different from post-traumatic stress, which would be what you get from an external event, but which is nevertheless a state of profound crisis. It's just somewhat different. So that's that. Now, having said that the body-mind connection is very important in the development of POTS and chronic fatigue and so on, and is not recognized as such, the mind-body connection is what will get you out of it, because these things go both ways. Okay, and this, of course, doesn't imply that the condition was in any way psychosomatic, because, as I said, something awful happened usually to the body, and this forces the limbic system into crisis. But the limbic system does also speak the language. It does speak language, and it does understand certain kinds of thoughts very much. So it is possible through the mind-body connection to reverse a trauma that has happened because of the body-mind connection, if you see what I mean, which is rather handy, I have to say. So it is. Anyway, so that's all I want to say on this topic. Body-mind connection, very important, underappreciated from a cultural point of view, but it is the key to POTS syndrome and many other mysterious conditions. Thank you.